Another exciting day at For All Women and Girls podcast by the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, where here women of influence and integrity share their stories of their journeys. But it's also a space where we look at the whole of society, where we all come together and uplift each other, where men actually see their power to uplift and where women are empowered to rise. And my amazing guest today, a young girl, a young woman who is doing amazing stuff in the space of climate action, and I can't just wait for her to introduce herself.
Oh.
Please, welcome to For All Women and Girls podcast. Tell us who you are.
Thank you so much, V. Hello, everyone who's watching. My name is Lynn Modesta. I am a youth climate advocate, and I work in the spaces of climate policy, education, and grassroots action as well, and specifically in reliance to climate adaptation and energy. And I am also a Gen Z. I have to make sure I say that.
Gen Z. And by the way, when we were starting this session, I picked my notebook. And I just say what you told me.
You have your notebook, I have my phone.
Oh yeah, so that's the generation we are dealing with. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us your background. You just said quite a bit of jargons here, climate adaptation. Is that the space where Gen Zs are? Please give us your background, when you, where you studied, and just tell us your journey to the place where you are now.
So, officially away from school, it's been 4 years in the workspace, but unofficially working in the space of climate, it's been almost 8 years. So my journey started at Africa Nazarene University. So I know most people started with a passion for environment in high school, primary. I did not. I actually didn't even know about the space until CUSPs decided to put me in a school and do environmental science. So I studied environmental science, graduated in Africa Nazarene University, class of 2021. Very proud.
Very recent.
Yes. We were actually the class after COVID. Yes, because COVID was 2020.
You guys are the ones who studied virtually.
Yes. So, and I think I liked that about our school because we transitioned very easily to online classes. So that was why it was easier for us to graduate in 2021. So I did environmental and natural resource management, but I focused on environmental science. I started off without the passion for environment. I'm not going to lie. But I think that is the difference for me. My passion for environment started from a learning perspective. It came from understanding what was happening and schooling about what is going on in terms of climate change, in terms of wildlife, in terms of conservation. And then now slowly that was how the passion began for me. So in my years in in campus, I started from first year, I was just trying to navigate that space.
Yes.
But by second year, we had a club that was failing. That's the Wildlife and Environmental Club of Africa Nazarene University, which is my alma mater. So the club had very good activities, but then at some point, some of that transition period, so there was a gap. Because most people were coming in, were still trying to figure out where they want to be, and then the last class was finalizing their 4th year, so there's like that leadership gap. And I remember one gentleman, actually, the former chairman, reaching out to me and my best friend, because we were just running around, and he was like, come to the meeting, and that is how we just started engaging. And I think that is where the passion for me started from. So having that class experience and then having that outside experience with the club activities. So we did a lot of activities under the WICANU, that's the Wildlife and Environmental Club of ANU, where we were able to organize some activities, tree plantings, working with other partners, including government. And I remember we have something that's annual now, and it's still there. We started it. That is the Green Week in ANU. So it was a function we were invited to by KUNEC, that's the KU Environmental Club, and we stole the idea, brought it to our school. And now it's still happening till now. And I remember the very first time we organized, it was bigger than even us. I think we dreamed big, but you know, like as a young person, especially starting out, you don't think it will be that big. Funding was a huge problem, getting funds for it.
Yes.
But our school was very supportive. That the launch of our NU Green Week, it's called Green Week, so Creation Care Week, because it's also a religious organization, a religious institution.
Yes, yes.
So the very first Green Week, we had the Minister of Environment then in 2018 coming into our school to launch that Green Week. And I remember they came with the ministers, and I remember I had a cart in school at that time as well, and just navigating how we were running back to class and then coming back for the Creation Care Week.
Did you see the power of government
Yes,
at that time?
honestly I did, because they were like, the minister was there, and then there was like leadership from Care First, there was leadership from other institutions, and I'm like, I want to be that, you know?
Yes, yes.
Because there was just so much, and then also the pool he had, because by then there was a lot going on in terms of environment, and there's a lot of conversations happening. So by that time, he was able to also pull, and our school was able to get trees from Care First as a donation for a field outside. So just how much one activity that was just supposed to be small was able to actually catapult into something that was very big was also a motivation for us. And I think for us at that time, especially as young ladies, because it was mostly me and my best friend then, and we were supported by our NU directors and the dean as well, and the pull they had is what got the minister there. So that motivation, that support is what catapulted us to now be able to do other greater things outside. So my journey for me is small ideas and actions and concept notes. We were starting writing concept notes and budgets to now being able to even organize more young people outside of just my institution. And I think, and I was also the first female chairperson of QSA. I just have to mention that.
Congratulations. Yes. These are critical achievements.
Yes, because
we are seated with the first female chairperson of Africa Nazarene
Environmental Club.
Yes.
And then the first chairperson of QSA, that's the Kenya Inter-University Environmental Clubs so it's an association of all clubs in different universities.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So the interactions from KUNEC, the interactions with the KANU, and then now we started working with other universities as well, UON and their environmental clubs. And that's how I got elected into it.
Fantastic. So you've actually, number one, you've run for elections. Number two, I hear you talking about small beginnings, doing small concepts, doing small activities and building that up. When you look at your generation, the Gen Z and their environment, because what message is that you can actually give them in being able to appreciate the small movements which now culminate into the big opportunities?
I think based on also my experience, it really helps to start humble.
Okay.
Just that small idea is what really helped us to get to where we are. For me and my best friend actually moved to Ethiopia at some point to be able to get jobs. And it started just from a small idea that we borrowed from another group of young people as well. And sometimes that is how it is. It's sharing ideas, and you can dream small, but then be very open to something growing even beyond what you had in mind. But most importantly for me, what I really picked up from that experience was support. Allow yourself to be supported. Allow yourself, because a lot of things changed along the way. I know we didn't even think in our wildest mind the minister would come to our event. But then when our dean was like, why don't you? And I'm like, why can't we, you know? That openness to be able to even shift and be able to grow something beyond what you had in mind allowed us to also build ourselves in terms, because it challenged us even in planning, because again, planning for government officials to come to your school is not very easy. It's security protocols, it's how tight is your program, it's how good is the content to be able to actually invite them to it. So that thinking beyond and being able to be challenged and also allowing yourself to be challenged, that is what really helped us to start from small beginnings and just catapult ourselves as well.
Yes. Lynn keeps telling us, why can't you? Why can't you? Why can't you? Now, getting into our conversation today further, one of the biggest celebrations around the women movement is actually the celebration of the Beijing Declarations. We are celebrating Beijing plus 30. Were you born then? Nope.
You can't put me on the spot like that.
I must. But then you have had and
Yes.
interacted
Yes.
with the conversations on the Beijing declarations. As a young person, what has resonated so much in the Beijing declarations, and what is that thing that you're championing for women and girls?
One, education for women and girls. And it's very good to see how much progress we've made in terms of educating girls just at the normal basic rights of education, but going beyond to the technical capacities of how women and girls can be able to engage in public policy forums and even general global forums and be able to champion for themselves, by themselves as well. And I think that is something I really celebrate within the Beijing Plus 30 progresses, that now we have more women being able to be part, because again, part of the COP negotiations, the Conference of Parties, which is part of the climate, and it's very easy to forget that they're women and young girls who are at the forefront of climate action.
Yes.
And one of the issues that really put that disparity was the fact that education was a very huge gap for women to be able to fully engage in such processes.
Yes.
If you don't know, then you won't be able to meaningfully engage. And also the language of some of these forums are very complicated. But having women and girls coming down to be able to, okay, this is what's happening, this is what we want to engage in, we want to meaningfully influence, how do we do it? And we've seen organizations and movements coming together, the feminist movements coming to be able to support how women and girls can be able to really effectively, one, support each other, two, translate some of these technical conversations,
Yes.
and three, meaningfully engage in such processes. It could even include traveling to such places. And we've seen more women and girls traveling to such forums and actually make a difference
Yes.
to how things are resonating in terms of even how policymakers are making plans for women and girls' education in the different countries. I think that is something I really applaud, and that's something that for me is very crucial to what I do. Education is a bridge.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we just don't realize how much education can be able to really help empower people until you see that empowerment happening for grassroots people. And we're being warned about using the word grassroots because, again, it's a normal place. It's just like any other place.
Yes.
It's just now it's been marginalized because of one or two, three things that we've been able to make as a decision. But then now we're changing that decision to now effectively have the people on the ground to be able to be part of the people who are actually making a difference at the top as well.
Fantastic. And when you look at the space, and also one of the key priority areas for actually as we celebrate Beijing Plus 30 is we have 6+1 action areas. One of that is climate justice, and you're in that climate space. Looking at that space, and especially just speaking from one of the critical elements of education, when you started out within that space, did you feel that your voice was heard, or did you have to grow into your influence?
I had to grow into my influence.
Uh-huh.
And for me, so I mentioned about, I might be talking about my school too much, but
No, it's
It was-
all right.
it was a very good
was
basis
a
for me.
social setting that
Yeah.
really, and I think that is a very good place, because sometimes we lose, probably we don't view school as the place where a lot of the things that we are doing
Yeah.
right now,
True.
where that social setting enabled us.
Yeah.
So talk about the space, because you just graduated recently,
Yeah.
4 years ago. Really, your experience will stem from that particular social setting. So talk about the school, talk
really
about the
do.
environment that allowed you to have your influence.
And I think also it's a way of challenging more institutions to really support such forums, because for us we had, so we'd have ideas. So there's the local conference of youth as well that came in. So for me, climate, so the Green Week was more environmental and sustainability.
Okay.
It's a bit general. But then based on how that Green Week was a success, more young people started to host events. And our school was actually very generous to even offer transport, because it's in Rongai, it's very far.
Yes.
But they'd even offer transport for young people to move back and forth. And that is just how intentional they were about having young people be part of the conversation. So my very first interaction around climate issues was with the local conference of youth. And I remember it was 2019, it was hosted in our school. So it was a different organization that came to our school. And our club was just invited as the host, because again, it was, they had to work with young people as well. And I remember there were so many jargons. And you were hearing, I've just started, I mean, I am also guilty of it now. So the adaptation, the mitigation, the COPs and whatever. And there's so many buzzwords. And I don't know if you know, but climate people have a lot of abbreviations and
yes.
buzzwords. So I think it was very hard to be able to feel like my voice could be heard, because I also didn't know what I was getting myself into in the first place. But continuously interacting with such forums allowed me to, okay, this is climate.
Yeah.
What is climate?
Yes.
And then now we transitioned into so many workshops that now talked about adaptation, mitigation, all those buzzwords, breaking them down one by one for young people. And one thing I really loved about the LCOI process was it was by young people as well, organized by young people, which allowed for you to be among peers. Because sometimes, again, it's very hard to ask questions if everyone else is technical and older than you. But then if you're among peers, and sometimes you feel like your question is dumb, but then you hear somebody who's asking something dumb, and you're like, we're good together, to go the same level.
Yes.
But like now we're growing together as well. So that was my journey. So I had to grow into my influence, but I also identified a space to be able to do that. And that for me was the LCOIs, the workshops that we could be able to organize. Okay. And I even transitioned into actually organizing LCOIs after that through the years. And actually the most recent one we did in Mombasa just last year. But now even challenging how it was done. Because for us, climate is mostly done by technical experts.
Yes.
But climate is felt by the grassroots people, the ones on the ground. So how are you merging those two realities? The reality of the technicality of climate change, the financing, the issues around technology issues. But then how are you going back to the simple things of climate, about floods, about food security losses? Because for a farmer, for them, climate is not adaptation or mitigation.
No,
for them
that
it's,
language is not even
they don't
with
use
them.
it.
Yeah.
For them, it's I lost my produces this year or this season, or the rains didn't come this season. So for me, that is the change I am seeing. Or for a mother who has to move from point A to point B with their child, migration issues because it's flooded in their region and now they have to lose their lands. Ancestral lands have been lost because of climate change related issues. And now understanding just how much it affects them allows you to also be able to build back into what are you fighting for at the technical level, at the policy level, and financing that can be able to really touch into the small nitty-gritties of climate impact. Where for them, how am I able to help a farmer get their produces back that same amount they used to before? How am I helping that lady who's lost everything to floods in Lake Victoria basins, that they can be able to maybe move and start a whole life? And there was something that a new word I learned, where it's justice, but it's reparative justice, where you're looking at reparations, where people are able to get back to where they were before. So for me, that's where I grew into my voice. I really loved, because I come from a place that my ushago is Kano Plains. I don't know if you have Kano. The ones who every year when it floods in Nyando, you're hearing Serikali's idea.
Yes.
So that is where my reality comes from.
Yes.
And I can't go back to my community and tell them that, yo, we have adaptation money. Or what is that?
What's that?
You know?
Yes.
For them, it's, I want to be able to still live in my farm and farm there and live with my people and be able to not have floods every season affect me. That, for me, is where I was able to find my voice, where I know the realities of where I come from, but I also understood the realities of where the technical world is going, and now merging those two. So, but that took a lot of education, and that took a lot of intentional moving towards where I can find that education as well. Yeah. Fantastic.
And just talking about that education, how do you translate, looking at the fact that you're leading within the organization across 6 African countries, but you still have to go back to Kano Plains, to, like you're just traveling to Narok. How do you translate whatever jargons and languages and everything to now the grassroots woman? And how do they contribute, or the grassroots man or the grassroots youth, and how do they translate that into the processes of climate action and climate justice?
So 2 ways that I've seen work. One is listening. Education is not always you speaking. Education is also listening sometimes.
Yes.
And when you go to grassroots, you learn that they know way more than you do. You know the technical jargons, yes, but they know a lot of the realities that is happening. So a lot of listening, and then now translating that. So what we do, it's more of like a dialogue between us. We don't look at education as teacher-student. It's more of a dialogue among peers. So what we do is we talk to them about, we just ask guided questions. where we're able to find out if it's floods. So I work with energy now specifically.
Okay.
So we're looking at now renewable energy increase among some of these grassroots areas. And now we're looking at how renewable, do they even know renewable energy? No,
yeah.
but they know solar.
Yeah,
you see.
but they don't know whether
It's renewable or not.
Yeah.
But now being able to say, okay, what factors about solar do you prefer over maybe 1, 2, 3 over an alternative energy source? And they'll tell you it's because I don't have to pay for it every day, maintenance is cheaper. And now you're able to explain to them that is why it's renewable.
Yes.
Renewable means you can continuously, get the sourcing without having to spend more money, etc.
Yes.
So that's how we explain it, based on what they've told us, and then kind of like aligning what we know with what they know as well. So that is how it's been able to work for us in terms of educating and awareness. But most importantly, now transitioning from that to how they're able to possibly influence is now using that education and now looking at public policies. I know public stakeholder forums have been very critical in enabling citizens to be able to engage in some of these policy processes.
Yeah.
But now we're trying to see how sometimes if some of the policies can come from the community themselves and advice. So this is like a policy we want to see. So now if we're talking about increased renewable energy among women, for instance, women will prioritize, they'll still want the firewood. And that is something that we've learned, that
Yes.
you will not take away firewood as much as you want.
They will
Because
still use
they'll
it.
want it. Because I'll give you the instance, again, I come from Kisumu, so I'll refer a lot to that. We fry fish with firewood.
Yes.
So for them, if you give them charcoal, it won't work for them, because again they use that large
The big.
big
The big pan.
yeah, the big pan to
Yes.
fry. That won't fit for kind of like a small jiko. So how are you still able to transition for them? And that's why the component of just transition comes in. How are you able to allow people to still live how they are,
Yeah.
maintain their cultures, maintain their way of life, maintain their livelihoods, while being able to make it cleaner and
Safer.
yes. So we've moved into now the clean cooking stoves conversations instead. So they still get to have their 3 stones, but it's modernized now.
Yes.
So it uses less firewood, it conserves heat, but at the
Yes.
same time it's safer and healthier because they don't have to deal with smoke and all that stuff.
Yes.
So now you see that how transition works for them. They still get to have what they want, but then now it looks a bit different. But that only comes when we listen to them. We're not forcing or imposing our way of transition on them. They also want it. They don't want to smell like smoke as well, but they want to be able to keep cooking. So that is how we work with education at grassroots, and that's how we work with uplifting some of this conversation. So based on what your lived reality is, what would you want to see, and then how do we translate it back to what is possible and what is we're moving towards as a country as well.
Fantastic. And just picking from that, what lessons have you learned from working with grassroots women that you think policymakers at the top should hear?
One, they have a lot of knowledge, a lot.
Grassroots
knowledge.
people have a lot of knowledge.
And I think it might not be in the language, and I think language has always been a barrier in climate change, a lot. And I think in every other sector. The language you speak may not be the language somebody else speaks, but that does not mean that they do not have the knowledge and capacity for it.
Okay.
So one, leveraging on the knowledge of women and lived experiences is very crucial to advise policy.
Okay.
And that includes also translating some of how our policy languages look like. And that is something that we need to also really invest in. That I might not go with the word adaptation, but instead I might go with the word, you can live better with your floods. So that's moving, how are we able to really be able to translate without losing meaning as well between the two?
Yes.
And I think that is very crucial when working with grassroots and being able to really have grassroots meaningfully kind of like support some of the processes that policymakers are doing. But 3, support. Women are very supportive. I feel like it's a community for me whenever I go to some of these grassroots meetings. First of all, they're mothers. So there's that innate need to always take care of someone.
Yes.
So how are we also able, on a cultural level, how are we able to really build on that? Because if a natural, that support pays, and I think we talked about this before this, about how some of our politicians, our female politicians, feel lonely once they've already got into some of these political positions. They're left among the men alone. Yes, that for lack of a better word. So by getting support, and again, we've talked about how we're able to work with them more often, listen to them, build on their knowledge, that will also allow us to get support. And I think we really miss that support system from the community and community women especially, because we don't interact with them as much.
Yes.
So policymakers really, really need to be able to go to the grassroots. It's not that expensive, I promise. It is hard, the travel is difficult, yes, but it's not that expensive. But imagine you have that muscle to be able to do it, why can't you just do it?
Yeah.
So I think for me, that is one lesson that I've learned, that one, the knowledge and awareness and capacity at the grassroots level is immense, and we can really borrow from it as well. But two, as Africans, the cultural aspect about how we work could really support how policy implementation can be able to be. So if our policy is guided by how culture, how people work, from the grassroots lived experiences, it can really help in implementation, because again, it's not new, it's just building on what's already existing. So it's very easy to come back and like, this was advised by this lived experience, so we created a policy against that, and then now we're able to easily just integrate our policy implementation within that, because there's support system as well. But most importantly for me is we are many. The
Yes.
fact that almost a quarter of the population is women allows us to be able to see there's a large workforce that can be able to really support how our systems are being developed in this country. So governance systems have always had a problem with implementation, because again, sometimes technical capacity, or sometimes there's not enough people to do 1, 2, 3. Leverage on that population, leverage on that number of people. All you have to do is just invest in the education and awareness, and then allow them to also advise how you want to do this work. You will have a seamless work experience, I promise. The implementation will be very seamless. And you have to compensate here and there, but if you're intentional about it, it won't be that expensive, because again, it's a continuous process. If you do it once, of course it will be expensive. Once coming back is very expensive, but also make it very continuous, because they also want to be part of it, if you just allow them to be part of it.
Fantastic. Picking up from our conversation on grassroots women and the government priority, especially the affirmative action when it came to women in leadership, you realize we have 47 women reps representing representation across the counties. As a young woman, what do you think of that representation? Does it go back to the grassroots and the work that we are doing around with the women at the grassroots?
I think it depends.
Yes.
Again, like any politician, there's the good and there's kind of like the ones who you have question marks around. So I think it was a good step in the right direction, because there was not enough representation of women, and having somebody specifically to be able to handle women issues. But again, as I mentioned, the population is large. 47 women may not be able to handle all 47 counties. In one county, there's so many women. And there's need for that support. So how are we creating structures to be able to support this women reps to be able to effectively implement some of their work? And we've seen even in Nairobi at some point where some of the women reps have worked directly with organizations, to be able to move some of the discussions around femicide, for instance, and other issues that's around GBV, or even kind of like menstrual health and hygiene. So there's that need for support and collaboration, but there needs to be better structures around it. I think we just planted the women there, and then we just left them there also. So there's that question mark of how we creating structures to support the women. Do they even have a budget that they can be able to work with that is effective, that does not have to rely on another man who might not really understand why this? Because how do you explain that I need one? There's some things I can't really explain to a man.
And you also, the first budget that is actually slashed is usually the
women and women gender budget.
Yes.
I mean, we went for a long time.
Previously, when we were slashed half a billion. No, it's true. It was the first budget to actually be cut, and you find that it becomes very questionable on actually women matters. How do we prioritize? Are these things that we are supposed to prioritize? How is the next generation? Because now it's your generation that now has to run with the action to be able to say, how do we ensure that we keep this going?
That's true. And also the fact that we have dumped, quote unquote, some of our women reps,
Yes.
but they've also dumped us to some extent. So there's
Oh,
that 50-50
balance.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think everyone has a role to play to support each other.
Yes.
So again, I know politics is politics. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's very difficult to navigate, especially if you're in a role whereby you feel you're the only person. So, and I like that the fact that GAF really works with the women reps together, creating a coalition where they can be able to work together and also kind of like share experiences that they can be able to do better in terms of implementation. But there's that gap also of how they're able to touch on the grassroots. I know the budget is also less, but how, what forums are we able to create where they can be able to speak to the women on the grassroots? Because again, just like any other work, there's that need to be able to be in touch with what's going on among the women folks. And that includes maybe creating forums, creating structures that can be able to allow that communication back and forth. So I think for me, it was a good step, but I think there was a gap within the structures and budgeting as well towards effectively implementing what the mandate of this women reps was. But most importantly, I'll also, especially for us as young women and girls, because again, at some point we're the ones who are going to take over. Do we want to see better structures, or do we want to go back to a structure that will now, I want to blame one or two, three people there, and then like I come in and it's the same structure, and I fall into the same trap where I'm doing the same things that the previous people did. So how are we also supporting and changing the structure as young girls? How are we showing up for the young women and the girls who are vying as well? And how are we supporting them? How are we electing them? And not just leaving them after elections and then just pushing demands. It could also be, okay, maybe you have this idea as a women rep that you want to work with the grassroots. I have an organization or an NGO and I have this budget. How can we work together? But also opening up how government collaborates with other institutions to be able to really implement its mandate. That needs to really come out strongly. And I think that's a gap that's been happening. And over time, processes will change. So for me, those are the two views that I could be able to have. But most importantly, as a young girl, it's really good to see more women being in that space, in that political space. It's a motivator, because now you're like, if she can do it, I can too.
I can do it,
So support.
Fantastic. Looking at the intersections of the different things, collaborations here, different engagements, and how are you navigating the intersections between gender, energy, and faith? I know the institution you're working for is a faith-based organization. The school you went to, Africa Nazarene, was faith-based. Maybe your primary or your secondary?
My primary, my secondary. I was in a Catholic school and then I moved into Anglican.
Yes. So how are those intersections so important? One, to your upbringing, and number two, to the African climate's journey.
One, to my upbringing, it's taught me integrity.
Okay.
In most of the schools, you're taught discipline. And I'm not going to disregard that some people have had very bad experiences in some of these religious institutions. It's true. But for me personally, speaking on a personal level, it's been kind of like a lesson on discipline and a lesson on integrity, which has guided how my work has been. But now into my work, I've seen just how much faith can influence work. So again, I was in a faith-based institution for kind of like almost 10 years of my life. I got that education because there was a school, there was a church that was able to build a school and get people, and we had very underprivileged students also coming into our schools, getting scholarships. And again, as I said, education is an equalizer. Being able to have faith institutions build schools helped support that equalization for women and girls, because for my high school, it was basically just an all-girls school. And being able to see how much faith influences even politics currently. I mean, we've seen how faith conversations has been going. For me, if we're able to leverage faith, then we're able to actually have more impact, because I mean, funding changes. We've seen the USAID issue. But then if there's one institution that can be able to easily gather funds, it's faith-based institutions. Faith,
look at the Catholic Church.
There's a lot of funding that goes into such faith institutions. So how are we able to leverage into that? But mostly the influence they have as well. Our mothers, my mother was a religious lady and kept us by the book because of that.
Tell us about your mom a bit.
Oh, my mom.
honoring women who
I
are,
feel like I
who are
really
ahead
like,
of us.
I don't know if she'll kill me for telling this story, but my mom's journey has been an inspiration. My mom started out as a cleaner in a hospital, moved into now a certified accountant. Took herself through school with kids.
Yes.
And juggling everyone else in the family, and got her degree and got her CPA.
Amazing.
And while I was still in school and I was still coming back with homework.
Yes.
So for me, I've seen just how much, and like faith, even for her, church was always a place where she could always go back to for support, aside from the household, where sometimes some of the women would come in and take care of us when she was having to go to, some of her church members would come in just to take care of us, or we'd get babysitters when she had to go like on a night school or anything of that sort. So just how much support the church can be able to provide, has provided, and has given communities to most women, shelters as well. How this has shaped me, shaped my mother, shaped my grandmother, is a testimony of how much faith can be able to move and change for women. Again, there's also the flip side where there's some church-based institutions or some religions which have also affected how women work and even affected the progress of women. But then, are we also intentionally moving into such places to be able to really change how they view women, how they view the progresses of women? Because again, some of these conversations around GBV has always gone back to the church.
Yes.
That what are you preaching? How are you advising the men? Because again, there's that authoritative figure that church has, or even any other religion, to the population. So if I, for instance, want to change how men think about women, easily I could talk to some of the religious institutions, tell them about what we want to see for women, and find ways where they can be able to advise some of the population. Like it go to a rural area and the church is preaching about how women can be able to go to school, girls can go to school, and then they've built a school for the girls. That's going to change everything.
Indeed.
So for me, I've seen how faith can really move a lot of things. I have experienced the support of faith from education perspective, but also on holistically as a person. I've seen how much influence it's had, the community it's provided for my family as well. So there's that influence of change that you can be able to have, and that kind of also supports the mandates of some of these institutions, NGOs, governments. Religion can really play a very implementing role, and also a behavioral change role. So if you want to see behavioral change,
through
faith.
Amazing. And at this point, we take a moment to acknowledge your mom for who she's been, and all mothers as well. So in each of our sessions, we do acknowledge our mothers for what they have done.
She works at KDC, so I'm just saying a shout out. She's also in a government institution.
Oh,
yes.
Mom at KDC, please give her a shout out.
Mom, thank you so much, because the number of times she has paid for my fare to some of these voluntary roles, So thank you, and I'm really proud of the work you've done, and I hope you're proud of me as well.
Fantastic.
And thank you to all mothers.
Yes, fantastic. Now coming back to you, and just looking at you as a you as a youth worker within the climate justice space, and as an educator. How do you keep young people, especially girls, engaged in climate policy when it can feel overwhelming or abstract?
Creating spaces.
Yes. Okay.
That is the
Is
one
this
thing.
one of the space?
Yes, definitely.
Have you spoken towards climate justice and
I have
policy?
shared your video as well, so we have been having this discussion.
Yes.
I think I mentioned even the previous videos were a learning
Yes.
moment for me. So creating spaces of learning for young women and girls. I mentioned we do the local conference of youth every year, where we support, because it's primarily around climate discussions, depending on intersectionalities, so food systems, if you have issues around energy, so you come in together, and then we create a national youth statement. And we've been very intentional about grassroots engagement, because again, initially the LCOI was national, so which means it only happened in Nairobi most of the time. The local conference of youth is a global. I have to say it
so that young people can actually look out for the local conference of youth.
Yes.
LCOI.
So LCOI is a body that is under the youth constituency under the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. So that's the UNFCCC, which is the body that governs all discussions around climate change. So the LCOI is kind of a nationalized way for young people to be able to put their views to influence now the main conference, the COPs, the Conference of Parties that happens annually as well. So that goes through the Conference of Youth and then now the Conference of Parties. So initially, for Kenya especially, it used to be Nairobi, it used to be nationalized, but now we wanted to break it down because one, we saw a gap that most of the times when grassroots young girls or even men came to such conferences, the buzzwords, because again, we assume that everyone's on the same level of the technical jargons, which is not true. So what we did instead, we decided doing pre-LCOIs, so pre-conferences, where we're able to now play catch up with some of the people. So based on what you know and what I know, how are we able to kind of like push together this and then create this statement at the national part. So we had one in Kajiado, we had another one in some other parts of Kilifi, which is a very primary place when it comes to issues around education for women. And we had some of this in Nakuru, each different areas. At a point we had some in Kisumu as well. So just to be able to try how we can be able to have different languages around this conference of parties, the COPs, the climate change discussions, in the different languages, and then have people be able to really submit some of their views and opinions based on what they've gone through. Because again, different counties have different priorities as well. So that was one. So that was a space that was created for that. But now what it's transitioned to, there was a time when we had the pre-ELCO in Kajiado. There was another group of young women who were going into agriculture. I don't know if most people know, but Kajiado, based on the audience, Kajiado is a very primarily pastoralist community, and the women stay behind most of the time. Nutrition has been an issue, because again, primarily their food is meat and milk and blood. So now looking at issues around vegetables, access is very expensive, because again, sometimes have to get it somewhere else. So there's another group organization that had started like agricultural project for the women, a climate smart agriculture project there. And they reached out to us because some of the women had their young girls, but they didn't know how to really effectively engage in that process, because the women themselves were also learning. So now the young girls are also like waiting to be able to catch up. So what we organized instead with KCIC was a forum where they can be able to learn about the business modules for agriculture. That's to be able to support, because again, look at me and my phone, technology. I'm always on my phone. So even if it's helping their parents be able to sell some of their produce on TikToks, etc. So what other avenues can they leverage on as young girls? But this came in from one space, it transitioned to this other space, and now it was more primary agriculture. And we've now created more spaces for young girls to be able to learn different skill sets that they can be able to use to implement within their localities. So spaces really have this catapulting effect that we don't really appreciate enough. So one thing has always been creating spaces for young people, and specifically young girls and women. But two, also open discussions and open dialogues. It's very easy for us to talk as women, but then when there's spaces for us to have those tough conversations about climate change, because again, GBV has been an increase because of climate change issues. Migration, we looked at the case of DRC recently, because one of the countries we work with is DRC, where some of the women were raped during the conflict issues. And resources have been we had a session around water recently where we were looking at the case study of Kibera, where there's sex for water instead. And most of the people who are being at the primary target are women, especially young girls. So now we're looking at how we're able to have these tough conversations and how can we be able to support each other towards this. And now in some places of Kibera, we're seeing that some of the solutions that the women suggested is the people who will manage the taps have to be women. So working with even some of these cartels, some of them sometimes it's also working with the people who you do not want to work with. Preaching to the unconverted, working with the cartels to make sure that there's some places where it's only women who are managing some of the water points, so that women feel comfortable enough to go to such places. It may not solve the entire problem, but being able to have that discussion allowed us to be able to see what's the easiest, safest solution that we can be able to have. So spaces, dialogues, but most importantly funding. We need to fund young girls. We cannot change anything if you're not financially supporting these people. Money is a very good enabler for everything. So we need to really fund key processes that young girls especially can be able to influence policies, because policies are the language that allows for implementation and more money to come in as well. So funding young girls to be able to influence policies, funding young girls' ideas of how to change society to be able to be safe for them as well. That is something that we need to really invest in as much as possible. Not meaning si kidogo, it's a lot of money.
Enough funding.
Yes, we need to really need to pour into this as well.
Yeah.
But also there's also the component of men supporting women. How we also supporting forums where men can be able to understand. I have male friends, and some of them normally complain that I complain about something, maybe even about my menstrual issues, and then they'll be like, I didn't know. And I'm like, sometimes I don't want to blame you because genuinely you didn't know.
Don't know.
Because maybe like in the household level, no one is teaching these boys what to know about maybe a woman, safety, menstrual health, etc. So it's not very easy for them to really figure out how to support if they also don't know. So how are we also educating the male counterparts? Even if you're going to a home and you want to support or empower women, even for us, we normally have to have the men they're sitting behind, they're not the primary people, but they're just somewhere in the periphery where they're also learning as well.
Yeah, and while they're there, you feel the confidence as well, because you feel there's a wall of protection.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's somebody who can, because like sometimes we've had issues where by implementation of projects for women specifically has caused violence at home.
Yes.
So how are we making sure that even the men understand that this is not something that we're trying to break up families, because culturally, again, we're not trying to break culture. But we're trying to see that women are able to also get supported. Again, I have had grassroots women from Masai land go to COPs because their husband even drives them to the airport and be like, what do you need? Do you need do you need to drive you to town to print something or get your passport? And that is what we want to see also. Because again, we're trying to, again, you've said it's a whole of society. It's every single person supporting. It's women at the forefront, but we're also supporting men to be able to be at the counterpart as well.
As we come to a close and looking at systems, power, and the future, the supporting mechanisms that we are talking about, the shifting of the power bases, and men knowing they have the power, understanding that. What would a power base that works for all women and girls, especially in climate justice, actually look like?
So climate justice involves every single person being at the forefront of fighting climate change, and that includes also fighting against fossil fuel exploration. That's something we really. So for me, a power base would be one that is grassroots led, and two, effectively supported by every single person. So government, NGOs, or any other system that is supposed to support the process, but two, communal, where Africans. Communities are the backbone of everything we do. So our power base has to be communal and ensure that it's based on the cultural needs and priorities of the communities. So that is how, for me, our power base. And it also has to be, there's some places where women have to be at the forefront, there's some places where men have to be at the forefront. So just being able to determine that power balance, that is what would also effectively make sure that power bases are very neutral and also very effective as well. Learning where, who, and what can be able to support. So that for me is, but also making sure it's really grassroots led.
And whole of society.
Yes, and whole of society.
Finally, if there's one message that you'd want to leave for that young woman listening across Africa and the world who are passionate about climate justice, who are passionate about climate action, and do not know where to start, what would you tell them?
Start with the person next to you, the girl next to you from school, the girl next to you, your neighbor. It helped when I had my best friend to navigate this journey with. We used to go to conferences together, we used to find opportunities together. If one of us was slacking, the other person was the accountability. Find that one person and then be very intentional. One thing that I would really advise is don't allow yourself to be taken advantage of. So it really helps when it's, movement in numbers really helps a lot, even if that number is 2. So when you move in numbers, it allows you to have accountability, but it also allows for safety for you, and you're moving together. Because again, that 2, your friend will have another friend, and you will have another friend, and now there's 4, and that's how it moves. But most importantly, start from what you have. So if you're in school, go to that environmental club. Start it if it's not there. And again, find people, write emails, post about it on TikTok. I really like how social media has really been an avenue for me and most of the climate people to be able to really put our work there and get support as much as possible. So use social media as much as possible as a young girl. If you do not have a phone, it's fine. Call people, text them. You meet somebody here at the side of the road who's maybe interested in anything around what you're doing. Text them, call them, follow up, tell them what you're doing. But most importantly, start from where you are. If you want to plant that tree in the back of your house, do it. A seedling is 50 bob. You can be able to find that here and there. But if you're not able to, just find a community where you can be able to talk about it. Sometimes education is just sitting around a tree and being able to talk about something, or even around a fireplace, or even in the kitchen with your mom. Yeah. That is how change is made as a young girl, and that's how you also get more support towards what you're doing. So find that community, invest in it, but most importantly, also ask for money. Women are mostly underpaid. So please ask to be paid. If there's a forum where they are supporting, you'd rather ask, they'd rather tell you they do not have. But that is also feedback, and I've seen that work a lot in the climate space where there's a lot of tokenism for young girls and generally young people. Ask for what is your fair share, and don't be afraid to walk away from spaces that do not serve you and do not serve your interest as well. But again, stay true to the cause. Integrity is a very key component in the climate space. Stay true to the cause. You're representing not just yourself, you're representing a community of people, you're representing a whole generation coming and the generation you're in. So make sure you stay true to the cause of what you're asking for and what you're making sure that back at home people get as well.
Wow. Today we've had a young woman, Lynn Modesta, in For All Women and Girls, and the knowledge she has poured. I can't say I had that kind of knowledge before. I can say I had a bit of knowledge here in social issues, maybe in the engineering field, but it's been an amazing conversation that we've had. She's very intentional, and critical to her conversation is be intentional in what you're doing, and also carry on with integrity and have a community around you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you here, and we do believe that you will continue impacting the climate space, the gender space, and the faith space.
Thank you.
Thank you.